In recent years, New Zealand wines have taken the world by storm, and wine is now one of our biggest export earners. New Zealand sells a lot of wine, and the reason it's so popular is because it's good wine, often the best in the world. You can only make the best wine if you've got the best grapes to make it with, and that's where you come in. The quality of next year's grapes depends a great deal on how good the vines are and how well they have been pruned, stripped and wrapped, all ready for the next crop. So what you do in the vineyard makes a great difference to the quality of the finished wine. Prune a vine wrong and it could take years to correct. The pruner is just as important as the grower, the viticulturalist, the winemaker and everyone else. Just like cricket or baseball or any other sport, it takes a good team to get a good result, and the pruner is the first one up to bat. So we're going to take a look at what makes a good pruner and how you, as well as your pruning gear, can stay sharp. The first thing you need are the tools for the job. The pruning shears or secateurs. Sometimes these may be electric secateurs. The loppers for the bigger canes, and a good supply of twisty ties to hold the trimmed canes. You'll need a stone and oil to keep your tools sharp, clean and lubricated. And you need your safety gear, gloves and goggles, along with plenty of water or other refreshment, especially on hot days. Finally, don't forget your hat and plenty of sunblock to protect your face and skin from the sun, even on cloudy days. So, we're nicely set up and ready to go. When you take a first look at a vine like this, you might think, where do we start? Because your job is to turn this overgrown tangle into something like this, a tight and tidy vine plant, giving enough grapes for 5 bottles of very fine wine. But that's a little further down the track. Firstly, from this tangle of canes, we're going to sort out 6 or 7 of the best. The canes we pick should be a nice golden brown colour, straight and healthy, thicker than a pencil but not as thick as your thumb, and they should originate from close to the head or trunk of the vine plant.
Okay, so often when confronted with a vine with plenty of options to deal with, we've got growth off the last year's spurs that's delivered good replacement canes to work with here, and also around the head area, and these types of shoots from here are certainly desirable, have all the attributes we're looking for. Sometimes it's best to work back from process elimination that we can see up on the canes that were laid last year. But there's not much usable out in this frame out here, so this is our best shoot on that. So we can make cuts automatically through here. The same process through on this. There's nothing usable up the top up here. But we can move back down into this sort of frame, and also on this bottom one here we haven't got anything with good attributes at all through there, so that would be coming through at the base point here. What that would end up with, we've got the shoots from these spurs plus 2 up on the older wood, leaving us with 6 canes that we can then make our selection from. Now we've made our decisions, we're going to make our cuts appropriately. One thing we need to look at is just the positioning and the height of forming of our head structure in this area. Often the secateurs can indicate to us where we want to promote replacement wood through in this zone through here. So when we're making this cut, Kathy's going to leave it slightly out a bit to retain the basil bud in here for replacement wood to regenerate growth for future years, rather than cutting that flush off there. So Kathy, if you want to just cut. And also up here we want to also be taking this older wood out through this point and also through there. So yeah, to make things easier with the stripping process, we'll make some cuts along the cord on here, just to make taking care not to cut the wire, and then we'll strip all that material out to leave with what we've got to work with.
So that's the first cuts, chosen and made. Now we can start stripping out the materials we don't want and make space for the next part of the operation. When stripping out, be careful not to damage the cane left behind, and stack the waste neatly down the middle of the row. Later, these waste cuttings will be cleaned up and recycled into mulch.
Okay, so now we've got our 6 canes left. We must assess it, that they're full length and all the attributes to what we're going to lay down are going to be usable to the top of the cane. Sometimes we can have it looking fine in around the head area, but may have been damaged mechanically or petered out in growth further up. We can now make some selections on what we're going to utilise for replacement wood for the following year, and also this year's fruiting canes. On this side of the plant we have a perfectly positioned spur for replacement wood sitting here that's pointing down the row, and the containment of that growth that comes from these buds will be situated in a nice height that we can work with. Again, going back to that sort of second tier height to work from, and with that in mind, then we'd certainly be utilising this shoot here as one of our canes for this year. On the other side, we're looking at similar sort of options, that we've got a good shoot above a potential spur site, and we've also got a good spur position sitting here, as well as good cane directly above that, and the top cane for top wire fruiting this year. So in this scenario, we can certainly say we've got a replacement spur sitting here, fruiting cane, and we can also come up to utilise fruiting canes for the top wires from these two on either side. So that's where we'd be looking at making the cuts. Here often we'll, once we've made that positive selection of what we're going to use for canes, then these are our backups in case of breakages to go down. So next step will be trimming up these shoots that we're going to utilise, get them down on the wire, and then we can make our cuts once we're assured we've got those safely on the wire.
Once again, the final aim is to end up with 4 good canes, but at this stage it's a good idea to keep a couple spare. We also have to be very careful that when cutting, trimming or moving the canes, we don't do any damage to these vital fragile buds. Every bud is already pre-programmed with how many bunches and how many grapes will grow later in the season, and all those grapes come from the shoot this tiny bud produces.
And therefore, if we can hold the secateurs on an angle away from the bud, leaving a few millimetres there to ensure that we don't do any damage coming across.
With the trimming done, we move on to the next stage, wrapping. Firstly, check that all your canes are on the right side of the wires. We want to make sure that the space between posts is evenly filled with well-wrapped canes. So here we need to reposition a cane back under the wire.
This one, because it's on the wrong side of the wire, I'm going to bring this and put it under the wire to come through like so, and up here.
Then we're ready to wrap, with sometimes a little more trimming to finish off.
I'm going to put this cane onto the bottom wire, making sure this is pulled down tightly as well. And then we can work this all the way down. So we've got it there. And then I'm going to get one of these ties, and we're going to put it around there. Twist them twice around. And you want at least 3 or 4 twists on them, and that holds that nice and flat. We're going to do the same as we did to this one, and we're going to make this go to this way. But before I can do that, I've also got to check that this is not going to knock into this post here. So I'm going to just cut this down a wee bit, going into the middle of the bud. And be very careful that you don't actually snap your cane. But because that's gone too far past the post, I'm actually going to bring it back to this one. That way, this bud here, that way we've got a hand space there. And I'm going to go through the bud again. And I should have that space there. So from there, we will tie a tie again. And that's that end process. Now we're going up to the top, and these two here are going to go to the top wire. So I'm going to now put this down. Now we're going to do the same as we did here. So I'm going to bring that down. I'm also going to cut through that bud. And cut through this bud. And from there, we'll hold that up there. I'm going to put my tie on, my twisty tie. And again, you've got to pull it in quite tight and make sure you do at least 3 to 4 twists. Bring this down. Making sure you don't break it, so you've got to be very, very careful when you're putting it the first lot down, the first whatever. And then that goes back up there, same as the other 3. 2, 3. There you go, and that's your end process. And now we have our 4 canes, which are sitting nicely, just sitting all nicely down there. There's no big bubbles anywhere. So from here, now that we've got these 4 canes down, we're still left with this cane here. So we can now spur this cane, like so. It's gone. That goes in that pile over there. And then we're left with this. This is the end product. What you see here is the end product of a plant in the vineyard.
So here we are with the finished product, beautiful canes, all the attributes we're looking for. The buds have remained intact both through the trimming process and wrapping through. The positioning of these canes for replacement wood as well as for the fruiting this year is in an ideal spot. We've got plenty of potential shoot growth both off the 1-year wood from the bud sites here, but in particular the spur sites being here and here with 2 good 2 bud plus basal spurs. So we're going to be in a much better position next year to work with for future cane selection. Managed to obtain a clear definition between the left and right hand side of the plant, so there's still enough space for growth up in here this coming season. Next year's replacement growth isn't going to be too crowded, maximum potential for light and fruitfulness for the following year. The canes are wrapped tightly onto the wire, so they're not going to move aside once we get shoot growth from these buds. The wire space between the wires being maintained as well, so we don't end up with this sagging down and decreasing that spacing, which can crowd up the fruit zone. Shoots from this cane as well as from here. We've got a clear separation between those two as well. So yeah, overall very happy with the end result here, and that's certainly going to provide the best fruiting potential for this vine for this coming season, and also for future years. We've got it set up beautifully to make the job a lot easier in the future.
The pruning principles are exactly the same for younger 2 cane plants and so on right through the vineyard. Eventually, every plant is nicely pruned, stripped, trimmed and wrapped, and over the next few months they'll become thick with leaves and rich with grapes. The pruner's job is done, and we're well on the way to a great wine. In a very young vineyard like this one, the pruning is a little easier, but just as important. We only have 1 or 2 canes to work with on each plant, so the task is to get them trimmed and wrapped securely on the lowest fruiting wire.
Basically, the first thing we look for is to walk up to the plant and put our elbow to the top of the first fruiting wire, and then Whatever's below your hand we'll cut off flush, including tendrils and buds. Any buds around the base of the plant and extra shoots. Also, nice clean cuts. Like so. And then we work back up the plant, cutting off tendrils and laterals. When we cut off a lateral, that first basal bud we just want to leave. Try not to cut that. Nice and flush cut. And then just work our way up the plant. And when we get to between 10 and 15 buds in, we'll just cut through the last bud at the end of the cane. Now what we're going to do, because we get strong winds through this district, we're going to wrap the cane from the west side, which is classed as the outside in. So what we want to do is press our hand down on the wire, get the trunk nice and straight, and 3 nice tight wraps. And then we'll tie it down, double twist, and that's the finished product. This is a different situation here. The plant hasn't reached the wire, so what we want to do is 2-bud it. So if we come down to the bottom where the graft is and we work our way up the first year wood, 2 buds, 1, 2, and then what we want to do is cut through the middle of the 3rd bud. And then after that we'll just clean up all the buds around the graft and shoots. Nice and flush cuts, nice and flush. So it's nice and clean. And that's the finished product.
One other thing we may find in a young vineyard are canes that haven't lignified. That is, they haven't built up a hard bark on the outside. Canes like this will simply rot and fail to produce any new shoots, so they have to go.
So what we want to do is come back 2 buds which have lignified and cut through that bud.
So that's the way to a perfect prune, a healthy harvest and a great wine. The job you do is the guarantee that these New Zealand vineyards will produce outstanding grapes and world-class wines for a very long time to come. And we can all drink to that. Cheers!